Are you afraid of your woman? Don't answer too fast. Most men's first instinct is no. And then they think about it for a second. They think about the last time they didn't say something because they ran the calculation first. The last time they backed down from a position they knew they were right about. The last time they apologized not because they were wrong, but because it was just easier. The last time they felt a knot in their stomach walking into the house, not knowing what mood they'd find her in. Sound familiar? My name is Cody DeLong, and this is King of Me. And I want to talk about the kind of fear nobody names, because it doesn't look like fear. It looks like being a good husband. It's not physical, but it's the fear of her disapproval, her anger, her silence, that particular look, that sigh, the way the temperature in a room can change when she's unhappy. And you've spent 20 years learning to read the weather. You have a thought, and before you say it out loud, you run the calculation. Is it worth it? And most of the time, the answer is no. You say something softer or nothing. You've gotten so good at the calculation, it happens almost automatically now. You back down from arguments you know you're right about. Not because she made a better point, but because continuing doesn't seem worth the aftermath. You've confused maturity with surrender. You make decisions about money, about the weekend, about what you want for dinner, based on what she'll approve of rather than what you actually want. Not because she demanded that, because at some point pleasing her became your default setting. None of that looks like fear. It looks like being accommodated, being a good partner, keeping the peace. But here's what it actually is. You've outsourced your own authority to manage someone else's emotions. That's fear, and it's hurting you both. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to become afraid of their wife. It doesn't work that way. It happens slowly, one accommodation at a time, each individual decision to back down, to go quiet, to just let it go. Each one of those felt reasonable in the moment. Reasonable, kind, mature. You were picking your battles. You were being flexible. You were not being one of those guys who has to be right about everything. The problem is that over 10, 15, 20 years, the reasonable decisions accumulate, and what you end up with is a pattern, a trained response. You learn that expressing your actual opinion leads to conflict. You learn that holding your position leads to a cold house. You learn that backing down leads to peace. So you stopped holding your positions. You stopped expressing opinions that might land wrong. You learned to do whatever created the least friction. She didn't take your authority, and you didn't lose it in one big moment. You handed it away in small pieces over years because each individual piece seemed reasonable at the time, and somewhere in there, quietly, without either of you really noticing, the power dynamic shifted. She stopped being with a man she had to reckon with. Here's what it costs you. The man who filters everything through what will she think has stopped having genuine thoughts. His opinions are pre-approved. His preferences are pre-negotiated. He doesn't actually know what he wants anymore. He knows what's allowed. That's a slow erosion of self. And it ends with you becoming a shell of your former self. But it costs her too. A woman cannot truly respect a man she can easily control. She may enjoy the control for a while. She may even insist on it because the dynamic is comfortable and she's become good at it. But underneath, something is missing. The man who folds every time isn't safe. He's not king material. He's not someone she can look up to. She wanted a captain. She ended up with a first mate who needs her sign-off before changing course. That's not what she signed up for either. Here's something most men never figure out. People-pleasing doesn't keep the peace. It guarantees more of the behavior you're trying to avoid. Every time you back down when she pushes, every time you apologize just to end the argument, every time you go quiet when she escalates, you're teaching her that escalation works. She's not a bad person. She's responding to what you've trained her to do. Yes, you trained her. The man who holds his ground calmly, without aggression, without cruelty, just steady, removes the incentive. When pushing stops getting results, the pushing stops. Not overnight, but it stops because it no longer gets results. The peace you've been sacrificing yourself for doesn't come from giving in. It comes from calm, confident conviction. I want to be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying be a hard ass. I'm not saying pick fights, withhold affection, or punish her for having emotions. I'm not saying become cold or difficult or make her feel like she's walking on eggshells. That's not reclaiming yourself. That's just a different kind of dysfunction. What I'm talking about is something quieter. Calm certainty. The ability to hold a position without aggression and without apology. The ability to sit with her displeasure without treating it as an emergency you need to fix. Being able to stay present through an uncomfortable moment, not to win, but because you're strong enough to take it. In practice, it looks like this. She's upset about something. And instead of scrambling, instead of apologizing preemptively, instead of backing down from the thing you said, you just stay. You hear her, you don't dismiss it, but you don't fold either. I hear you, honey. I see that you're upset. And I still think what I said is true. That's it. Said calmly, without defensiveness, without cruelty, just a man who knows what he thinks and doesn't need her agreement to keep thinking it. Look, the first few times you do this, it'll feel like you're about to start a war. You're not. You're just introducing her to a version of you that she hasn't seen in a while. Start with the small stuff. What you want for dinner, which movie, how you want to spend Saturday. The small concessions are where the pattern lives. The man who can say, actually, I want Italian, without negotiating it, is the same man who can have the harder conversations when they come. Here's the truth nobody tells you. This is hard to undo. Years of accommodation don't reverse in a week. She'll push back when you change. Hold firm anyway. The man who comes out the other side, the one who has opinions and holds them, who can hear no without collapsing and feel her anger without apologizing for existing, that man is more attractive, more respected, and more at peace with himself than the one who's been managing her moods for the last 20 years. And here's what I'll leave you with. Most women don't actually want to be the captain. They want a man whose judgment they can trust, whose lead they can follow, who shows up with a calm certainty that shows that he believes in himself. Give her that man. And if this hits home, I've put together a free cheat sheet called Hold Your Frame. It's a one-page field guide with a quick awareness check and 5 real scenarios and what to actually say. Link in the description. If you're watching this part of the series, the negotiating sex video covers what the conversation actually looks like when you do start asking for what you want. Link in the description. Because that conversation goes differently when the man having it isn't afraid. Stop drifting, start leading.